The first time Harry McCready heard the desperate cries echoing through the dense maple forests of Algonquin Provincial Park at dawn, he thought it might be another injured hiker calling for help during what should have been a peaceful morning patrol. The sound that made him stop his ranger vehicle on the winding forest road wasn't the usual symphony of birdsong and rustling leaves that had accompanied his rounds for the past 15 years. It was something raw, something filled with pain and terror that cut through the crisp October air like a blade. His experienced ears tracked toward a cluster of ancient pines where the sound seemed to originate. And there, caught in the cruel embrace of an illegal steel-leg trap and tangled barbed wire, amber eyes blazed with agony and desperation, despite obvious exhaustion from what must have been hours of struggle. In that suspended moment between discovery and action, Harry felt the weight of choice settle in his chest, the ancient decision between intervention and calling for backup that every park ranger faces when confronted with dangerous wildlife in distress. What he couldn't know then was that this single moment would alter the trajectory of two lives forever, binding one dedicated ranger and one magnificent wild predator, in a connection that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the boundaries between human duty and the profound gratitude that exists in the natural world. If you enjoy the video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Harry McCready had been patrolling the remote sections of Algonquin Provincial Park for 15 years, but he'd never encountered anything quite like the scene that greeted him in the early hours of that October morning. The 62-year-old park ranger had seen his share of wildlife emergencies, poaching incidents, and dangerous rescues, but the sight of a full-grown bobcat caught in illegal trapping equipment triggered both his professional training and a deep personal anger at the cruelty he was witnessing. The October mornings in Ontario had turned surprisingly cold, transforming the forest floor into a carpet of frost-covered leaves that crunched beneath Harry's boots as he approached the trapped animal. As a park ranger who had spent the last decade and a half protecting wildlife and enforcing conservation laws, Harry had developed an instinct for recognizing when immediate intervention could mean the difference between life and death for the creatures under his protection. What he hadn't expected was to find himself face to face with a magnificent bobcat, clearly in its prime, caught in a barbaric steel-leg trap that had been camouflaged with leaves and branches to avoid detection by park authorities. The bobcat's powerful haunches were tangled in barbed wire that had been strung between trees, creating a secondary trap that had prevented any possibility of escape, even if the animal had managed to free itself from the steel jaws clamped around its hind leg. The cat's tawny coat was matted with blood and debris, making its normally camouflaged form starkly visible against the autumn forest floor. But it wasn't just the physical injuries that posed an immediate threat. It was the bobcat's obvious exhaustion from what must have been hours of desperate struggle, and the way its breathing had become shallow and labored, indicating that shock and blood loss were becoming critical factors in its survival. Golden eyes tracked Harry's movement with the intense focus of a cornered predator, but there was something heartbreaking about the animal's obvious desperation. Its ears flattened against its skull in a display of fear and aggression, but its attempts to struggle had become weaker with each passing minute, and Harry could see that, without immediate intervention, this magnificent creature would not survive the morning. "Easy there, big guy," Harry murmured, his voice carrying the same calm authority he'd learned to use with frightened animals during countless rescue situations over his career. "I know you're scared, but I'm here to help you." Harry had dealt with dangerous wildlife emergencies throughout his career as a park ranger, but approaching a trapped wild predator presented unique challenges that required careful planning and absolute precision. The bobcat was clearly in severe distress and likely terrified, making it extremely dangerous despite its weakened condition. Every instinct the animal possessed would be telling it to fight or flee, and with escape impossible due to the trap, Harry knew he was looking at a creature that would use every ounce of remaining strength to defend itself. But there was something in those amber eyes that reminded him of the most desperate rescue situations he'd encountered. A combination of intelligence and profound need that transcended species boundaries. The bobcat wasn't just injured. It was completely helpless in a situation where every passing minute brought it closer to death from blood loss, shock, or exhaustion. Moving slowly and deliberately, Harry retrieved his emergency rescue kit from his vehicle, knowing that freeing the bobcat would require bolt cutters for the trap, heavy gloves for protection, and a transport carrier large enough to safely contain a powerful wild predator during the journey to medical care. "I know this is terrifying," Harry continued, his voice maintaining the gentle tone he'd learned was crucial when dealing with traumatized animals who couldn't understand that help was available. "But that trap isn't supposed to be here, and neither are you." The bobcat's response was exactly what Harry expected from a cornered predator: ears flattened, muscles tensed for attack, and a low growling that served as warning that any approach would be met with fierce resistance. But Harry noticed that despite its defensive posture, the animal's struggles had become weaker, and its breathing indicated that time was running out. The next several minutes unfolded like a carefully choreographed rescue operation. Harry approached incrementally, speaking continuously in soft, reassuring tones while keeping his movements slow and predictable. The bobcat watched every step, its attention focused entirely on Harry's approach while calculating whether this human represented additional threat or potential salvation. When Harry was close enough to assess the full extent of the bobcat's injuries, a deeply lacerated hind leg where the trap had clamped down, multiple cuts from the barbed wire, and obvious signs of dehydration and exhaustion from prolonged struggle, he made his move. Rather than trying to restrain the frightened animal immediately, he began working on the barbed wire that had created the secondary entanglement. "Come on, buddy," Harry said, surprising himself with how much emotion had crept into his voice. "Let's get you out of this mess and back where you belong." Using wire cutters to carefully remove the barbed wire required getting dangerously close to the trapped predator. But Harry's experience had taught him that sometimes the most direct approach was also the safest. Each cut of wire brought visible relief to the bobcat, as pressure was reduced on its trapped leg. And Harry noticed that the animal's growling had shifted from aggressive warning to what almost sounded like frustrated communication. The steel leg trap presented the greatest challenge, requiring Harry to use bolt cutters while maintaining enough distance to avoid serious injury if the bobcat struck out in fear or pain. The mechanism was designed to hold large predators securely, and freeing the animal without causing additional damage required precision that left no room for error. "Almost there," Harry murmured as he worked the bolt cutters into position. "Just a little more patience, and you'll be free." When the trap finally opened with a metallic snap that echoed through the forest, the bobcat's immediate response was exactly what Harry had hoped for. Instead of attacking or fleeing into the underbrush where its injuries would prevent survival, the exhausted animal simply lay still, too weak to do anything except watch Harry with those intelligent amber eyes. Wrapping the injured bobcat in the emergency blanket from his rescue kit, Harry carefully lifted the surprisingly heavy animal and carried it to his vehicle, his ranger training helping him assess the extent of the injuries while considering the urgent need for professional veterinary care. "What have you got there, Harry?" asked Dr. Elizabeth Morrison when Harry called the Kawartha Wildlife Center from his truck. "Another poaching situation. Worse than that," Harry replied, carefully positioning the wrapped bobcat in the back of his vehicle where it could remain secure during transport. "Steel leg trap and barbed wire. This isn't just poaching. This is deliberate cruelty." The drive to the Wildlife Center felt endless as Harry monitored the bobcat's condition and tried to control his growing anger at whoever had set illegal traps in protected park territory. He'd spent 15 years fighting poachers and illegal hunters, but the sophistication and cruelty of this trapping setup indicated someone with extensive knowledge of wildlife behavior and a complete disregard for conservation laws. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison had been treating injured wildlife for over 2 decades, but the condition of the bobcat Harry brought to the Kawartha Wildlife Center represented one of the most severe trapping injuries she'd encountered. The examination revealed not just the obvious trauma from the steel trap and barbed wire, but evidence of prolonged stress and struggle that had pushed the animal to the edge of survival. He's been fighting that trap for at least 6 hours, maybe longer, Dr. Morrison explained as she administered pain medication and began cleaning the wounds. Much longer, and we would have lost him to shock and blood loss. But Dr. Morrison had disturbing news that would transform Harry's rescue from an isolated incident into something much more significant. This wasn't the first victim of illegal trapping she'd treated in recent weeks. We've had 4 other animals brought in with similar injuries over the past month. Dr. Morrison continued as she worked to stabilize the bobcat's condition. 2 foxes, a lynx, and a young black bear, all caught in steel traps, all in areas that should be completely protected from hunting or trapping activities. The implications were staggering. Someone was operating an extensive illegal trapping network within provincial park boundaries, targeting the protected wildlife that Harry had dedicated his career to safeguarding. The injuries Dr. Morrison described indicated a systematic operation designed to capture valuable fur-bearing animals regardless of legal protections or conservation status. "I need to know everything about those other cases," Harry said, his voice carrying the determination that had made him effective in 15 years of law enforcement activities. "Locations, timing, trap types, everything that might help us track down whoever is doing this." What followed was the most intensive investigation Harry had conducted during his career as a park ranger. Working with provincial wildlife enforcement officers and using advanced trail camera technology, Harry began systematic surveillance of the remote areas where the trapped animals had been found. The pattern that emerged was both sophisticated and infuriating. The illegal trapper was targeting game trails and water sources in the most remote sections of the park, using camouflaged steel traps and secondary barriers designed to prevent escape and ensure that captured animals remained secured until they could be retrieved. "Whoever is doing this knows wildlife behavior extremely well," observed Sergeant Mike Peterson from the Ontario Provincial Police Wildlife Enforcement Unit. "These trap placements show professional-level knowledge of animal movement patterns and feeding behaviors." Harry's investigation was methodical and thorough, combining his knowledge of park geography with systematic camera placement and regular patrol schedules designed to identify suspicious human activity in remote areas. His anger at the cruelty he'd witnessed drove him to spend extra hours tracking through difficult terrain, checking camera footage, and documenting evidence. The breakthrough came 3 weeks into the investigation when trail cameras captured images of Marcus Webb, a 45-year-old man with previous poaching convictions, checking trap lines in a restricted area of the park. The footage showed Webb retrieving animals from traps, resetting equipment, and covering his tracks with the expertise of someone who had been conducting illegal operations for an extended period. "We've got him," Harry reported to Sergeant Peterson after reviewing the camera footage. "Multiple violations, clear evidence of systematic trapping, and enough documentation to ensure serious charges." Marcus Webb's arrest was the culmination of Harry's investigation, but it also revealed the full scope of the illegal operation. Webb had been running trap lines throughout 3 different parks, targeting valuable fur-bearing animals and selling pelts through black market channels that avoided all conservation regulations and protective measures. "He's been doing this for years," Sergeant Peterson explained during Webb's arraignment. The evidence suggests hundreds of animals may have been illegally trapped, with most of the activity concentrated in remote areas where detection was unlikely. Webb's conviction resulted in substantial fines, jail time, and a lifetime ban from all provincial parks and conservation areas. But for Harry, the most important outcome was ensuring that the illegal trapping network had been completely dismantled and that the protected wildlife under his care would no longer face these systematic threats. Meanwhile, at the Kawartha Wildlife Center, the bobcat's recovery was progressing better than anyone had dared hope. Dr. Morrison's treatment had addressed the immediate trauma from the trap and barbed wire, but the animal's remarkable resilience and strong constitution were the key factors in its survival and healing. "He's doing incredibly well," Dr. Morrison reported during one of Harry's regular visits to check on the bobcat's progress. "The wounds are healing cleanly. He's regained full use of the injured leg, and his appetite and behavior indicate complete recovery from the trauma." After 6 weeks of intensive care and rehabilitation, Dr. Morrison declared the bobcat ready for release back to the wild. The animal had not only recovered from its physical injuries, but had maintained the wariness and independence necessary for successful survival in its natural habitat. Harry had requested the privilege of conducting the release personally, both as the ranger who had found and rescued the animal and as recognition of his role in dismantling the illegal trapping operation that had threatened the park's wildlife population. The release location was carefully chosen, a remote section of Algonquin Park far from human activity, with abundant prey species, water sources, and suitable territorial range for a mature bobcat. Harry's transport carrier was positioned near a stream, surrounded by dense forest that would provide immediate cover and hunting opportunities. When the carrier door was opened, the bobcat emerged with the caution Harry expected from a wild predator assessing unfamiliar territory. For several minutes, the animal remained near the carrier, its amber eyes scanning the forest environment with the intense focus that indicated its survival instincts were fully engaged. Then something extraordinary happened that neither Harry nor Dr. Morrison, who had accompanied him for the release, could have anticipated. Instead of immediately disappearing into the forest as most released animals did, the bobcat turned toward Harry and began approaching him with deliberate, unhurried steps. There was no aggression in its posture, no fear in its movements, only what could be described as purposeful intention. "Harry," Dr. Morrison whispered, her voice filled with amazement. "I've never seen anything like this." The bobcat approached until it was close enough to touch, then slowly and gently placed its front paws on Harry's shoulders, maintaining direct eye contact in a gesture that transcended species boundaries. For several long moments, Ranger and Bobcat remained connected in what felt like a profound expression of gratitude and recognition. "You're welcome, buddy," Harry said softly, his voice thick with emotion he hadn't expected to feel. "You deserved your freedom." Then, as if the message had been delivered and understood, the bobcat stepped back, turned toward the forest, and disappeared into the wilderness with the fluid grace that reminded everyone present why these animals were such successful predators. "Perfect," Dr. Morrison said with satisfaction and wonder. "I've been doing wildlife rehabilitation for 23 years, and I've never witnessed anything like that farewell." Follow-up monitoring over the next several months confirmed that the bobcat had successfully re-established territory in its natural environment. Trail cameras occasionally captured images of the animal hunting, patrolling, and exhibiting all the natural behaviors that indicated complete adaptation to wild living. But the most meaningful confirmation of the bobcat's successful return to the wild came when Harry, during his regular patrols, would occasionally spot the distinctive markings and movement patterns that told him his former patient was not just surviving, but thriving in the protected environment he worked to maintain. The plaque Harry had placed at the location where he'd found the trapped bobcat reads simply, Wildlife protected here. Illegal trapping prosecuted to full extent of law. It was both a warning to potential poachers and a reminder that individual acts of rescue could inspire broader conservation efforts. Years later, when new rangers asked Harry about his most memorable case, he would tell the Bobcat story, not just as an example of successful wildlife rescue, but as a reminder that the bonds between humans and wild animals could transcend the boundaries most people assumed existed between species. He'd learned that protecting wildlife required not just law enforcement skills, but understanding of animal behavior, medical knowledge, and the complex investigation techniques necessary to combat organized poaching operations. But he'd also learned that sometimes, when faced with a creature in desperate need, the choice to risk personal safety for rescue could create connections that changed how people viewed their relationship with the natural world. The Bobcat had taught him that wild animals were not just representatives of their species, but individuals capable of recognizing help, forming bonds, and expressing gratitude in ways that challenged conventional understanding of animal consciousness and emotion. If you enjoy the video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. The park where Harry continued his work as a ranger remained focused on conservation and wildlife protection. But the Bobcat story had influenced how the entire staff approached wildlife emergencies and poaching investigations. New protocols were established for rescue situations. Additional trail cameras were installed in remote areas, and several staff members had received advanced training in wildlife emergency care. Most importantly, the Bobcat's rescue and the investigation it inspired had eliminated a major threat to the park's wildlife population, protecting countless animals from the cruelty and illegal exploitation that had operated undetected for years. The moment of gratitude the Bobcat had expressed during its release remained the most powerful experience of Harry's career, demonstrating that compassion and professional duty could combine to create outcomes that benefited both individual animals and broader conservation efforts. Their story had inspired others as well, becoming part of educational programs at local schools and environmental groups, illustrating the positive impact that dedicated law enforcement and proper wildlife care could have on protected species and their habitats. The ranger station where Harry worked displayed photographs from the Bobcat's rescue and release, serving as reminders that individual commitment to wildlife protection could create extraordinary outcomes when combined with professional expertise and genuine respect for the animals under their care. In the end, the magnificent Bobcat who had been found dying in an illegal trap had become a symbol of resilience, the importance of wildlife law enforcement, and the profound connections that could form when humans chose to risk themselves for the protection of wild creatures who could not speak for themselves, but could express gratitude in ways that transcended words and touched the deepest parts of human compassion. If you enjoy the video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.